following broadcast is a work of pure fiction. Names, characters, places, events, and incidents portrayed in this narration are entirely imaginary and created solely for entertainment purposes. Listener discretion is advised. If you enjoy this chilling and spine-tingling narration, please show your support by liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Good evening, listeners. Wherever you are, I hope you're safe. I hope you're warm. Though if you're tuning in tonight, I know that last part is probably just wishful thinking. This is Adrian Kane, broadcasting live, or at least as live as I can be, from my little station here in the middle of nowhere. You've probably noticed by now that something isn't right. No, scratch that. Everything is wrong. The world we knew. It's been flipped on its frozen head. Let me tell you what I know so far. About 72 hours ago, the temperatures started dropping. And I'm not talking about your usual cold snap. No, this isn't some freak winter storm or an unusually bad blizzard. This is something else entirely. People in Florida woke up to frost on their lawns. In Texas, there's snow piling up like it's the Midwest. And as for the Midwest, don't even ask. Minneapolis, it's like the damn Arctic Circle up there. Now, I know what you're thinking, Adrian, it's just weather. It'll pass. It always does. But here's the thing. This doesn't feel like something that's gonna pass. The meteorologists don't know what's happening. The scientists, they're scrambling for answers, throwing out words like jet stream collapse and polar vortex amplification. I don't know about you, but those are just fancy ways of saying, we're in trouble. Earlier today, I got a report from New York. The city's unrecognizable. Snowdrifts are swallowing cars, entire streets are frozen over, and people are stuck. Their apartments weren't built for this kind of cold. The power grid's failing in some places, and the heating systems. Well, let's just say they weren't designed for a sudden ice age. It's not just the cities, though. Out in the countryside, it's even worse. I heard about a farmer in Kansas, an old-timer, the kind of guy who's seen it all. He thought he could brave the cold, tend to his livestock one last time. They found him frozen solid in the field, still clutching a bag of feed. And that's not the only story. Families trapped in their homes because the snow's too high to open the doors. People trying to flee south, only to find that it's just as cold there as it is up north. Hell, even deserts like Arizona are seeing frost. Can you believe that? And here's the kicker, folks. No one knows why this is happening. Oh, they've got theories, sure. Something about the jet stream breaking apart, letting all that polar air escape and settle where it damn well pleases. Some people are pointing fingers at solar activity, saying the sun's gone quiet. Others think this is the Earth's way of hitting the reset button after everything we've done to it. And maybe they're all right, or maybe none of them are. I'll be honest with you. I don't have any answers. All I've got are stories. Stories of people out there trying to make sense of this, trying to survive it. Like the family in Wisconsin who burned every piece of furniture in their house just to stay warm for one more night. Or the couple in New Orleans who thought they'd escaped the worst of it, only to find their pipes frozen and their home turned into an icebox. You know, there's a kind of quiet out there now. Not the peaceful kind, though. This is eerie, like the world is holding its breath, waiting for whatever comes next. The birds are gone. The usual hum of traffic, the sounds of life, they've disappeared, smothered under the weight of this cold. I don't know how long I'll be able to keep this broadcast going. The generator's working for now, but who knows for how much longer. All I can do is keep talking, keep you company, and hope that somewhere out there, someone's listening. For now, stay inside. Conserve what you can. Hug your loved ones if you're lucky enough to have them nearby. And remember, you're not alone in this. As long as I'm here, I'll keep talking. I'll keep telling your stories. This is Adrian Kane, signing off for now, but I'll be back. If the cold doesn't take me first, This is Adrian Kane, broadcasting again to those who are still out there, still listening. If you're tuning in tonight, I need you to listen closely. Because what I'm about to tell you, it might sound unbelievable, but I swear to you, every word of it is true. The skies, they've changed. If you've looked outside, you've probably noticed it. There's a stillness now. No clouds moving, no sun breaking through, no stars twinkling at night. Just this heavy, oppressive gray, stretching from horizon to horizon like a massive shroud. It's not just over your town or your city, it's everywhere. The skies have frozen, and it feels like the earth itself has stopped breathing. It started yesterday. People reported seeing strange patterns in the sky, almost like waves rippling through the clouds. Some called it beautiful at first, like a painting come to life. But then, as the hours passed, the air got colder. The skies grew darker, and that's when the snow started falling. Not gentle flakes like you'd expect in winter, no. This snow came down in sheets, thick and fast, burying entire neighborhoods in hours. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was too late. I spoke to a trucker earlier today. He called into the station, his voice shaking as he told me what he saw on the interstate. He'd been driving south, trying to outrun the cold when the storm hit. The snow came out of nowhere, blinding him completely. He said it felt like driving through an endless white void. And then he heard it. A cracking sound, so loud it made his ears ring. He said it wasn't just the snow or the ice, it was the sky itself. He swears he saw the clouds split open like glass shattering before everything went silent again. I don't know if he imagined it or if the cold is playing tricks on us all. But here's the thing. He's not the only one who's heard it. In Chicago, there's a train stuck on the tracks. Hundreds of passengers trapped without heat, waiting for a rescue that may never come. The storm hit so fast that the rail systems froze solid, locking the train in place. One woman who managed to get a call through told me that people are breaking apart seat cushions to use as insulation. Others are huddling together, sharing body heat, doing whatever they can to stay alive. She said there's a baby on board, and the mother is crying because she knows they don't have long before the cold takes them all. And it's not just the trains. Planes are grounded, airports shut down entirely. The runways are too icy to land on, and the planes themselves can't handle these temperatures. I heard about a small aircraft that tried to make an emergency landing outside of Denver. The pilot didn't make it. The plane froze midair, engine stalling, and came down hard. By the time rescuers arrived, well, they said it looked like the entire thing had been encased in ice. Then there's the sky itself. People are reporting strange lights, green, blue, purple, dancing above the clouds. At first they thought it was the aurora borealis, but scientists are saying it's something else. Something new, some kind of electrical activity caused by the extreme cold interacting with the atmosphere. But you know what's even stranger? Some folks are saying they've seen shapes in those lights. Not just patterns, but figures. Moving, shifting, watching. I don't know what to make of it. Maybe it's just the cold messing with our heads. Or maybe there's something up there. Something we're not meant to understand. And then there's the silence. Have you noticed it? No birds, no insects, no planes overhead. Even the sound of the wind feels wrong. Too hollow, too sharp. I stepped outside earlier today to check the generator, and I swear the snow wasn't just falling, it was whispering. Like it had a voice of its own. I know how that sounds, I do. But after everything I've seen and heard these past few days, I'm starting to question what's real and what's not. I think the scariest part is how quickly it's spreading. This isn't just a freak storm hitting one part of the world, it's global. I've got reports from Australia where the outback is freezing over, from Africa where the Sahara is dusted with snow for the first time in recorded history. Even the equator isn't safe. Tropical rainforests are turning into icy wastelands. It's like the entire planet is being swallowed by this deep freeze, and there's no end in sight. I don't have to tell you how bad things are getting. You're living it. Food is running out. Water pipes are freezing, bursting, leaving people without clean drinking water. Hospitals are overwhelmed. Emergency shelters are filling up faster than they can be built, and people are starting to lose hope. I heard about a family in Oregon. They've been trying to keep warm by running their car engine in the garage. They didn't know about the carbon monoxide. By the time anyone found them, it was too late. Stories like that, they're everywhere now. People doing whatever they can to survive, not realizing the danger until it's too late. If you're still listening, and I hope to God you are, take this as a warning. Don't try to run. Don't try to fight the cold. It'll win every time. Stay indoors, stay together, and don't waste your heat or your food. Because I don't think this is going to get better anytime soon. I don't know what's happening out there. All I know is that the world isn't the same anymore. The skies have frozen, and it feels like the end of something and the beginning of something else. Stay safe, my friends. Stay warm. And if you can, keep listening. I'll be here as long as I can. This is Adrian Kane. Another night, another broadcast. I don't know how many of you are still out there, listening. I don't even know if this signal is reaching anyone at all anymore. But if you can hear me, if you're still clinging to some semblance of hope in this frozen hell, then stay with me. Because tonight, I'm going to tell you about what's happening in the cities. The once bustling hubs of life, commerce, and connection that are now little more than ghostly, frozen tombs. I used to think of cities as unstoppable. You know, those places where life never pauses, where lights never go out, and where people hustle and grind no matter what the world throws at them. But now the streets are silent. The lights are dark, and the people are vanishing. I got a report earlier today from someone in New York City, or what's left of it anyway. The city that never sleeps is finally still. Times Square is buried under feet of snow. The giant screens that once lit up the night sky, dark. Broadway theaters are frozen shut, their marquees caked in ice. Even the subway system, the lifeline of the city, has ground to a halt. The tunnels are filled with ice, the trains stranded like relics of a bygone era. The rats, the cockroaches, those survivors of everything humanity has ever thrown at them, they're gone too. If the vermin can't survive this, what chance do we have? And it's not just New York. Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, all of them are suffering the same fate. People fled their homes, thinking they could outrun the cold. But where are they running to? The highways are frozen, littered with abandoned cars. Airports are useless, their runways slick with ice. Even the South, the so-called warm, safe haven, has been swallowed by this relentless freeze. I heard reports of snow in Mexico, snow in the Sahara. Do you understand what that means? There's nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. Let me tell you about Boston. A man there, an old-school firefighter, called into the station earlier today. Said his crew had been trying to rescue people trapped in an apartment building. The heat had gone out, and the residents, most of them elderly, were burning books, furniture, anything they could find to stay warm. When the firefighters got there, the people were alive, barely, but the smoke from their makeshift fire had filled the building, and they were choking on it. Imagine that, freezing to death or suffocating. Those were their choices. In Detroit, a group of people tried to take refuge in a shopping mall. At first, it seemed like the perfect solution. Food courts for supplies, clothing stores for extra layers, and plenty of space to spread out. But the power went out, and the building turned into an icebox. The windows froze over, and the roof collapsed under the weight of the snow. Only a handful of them made it out. The rest, they didn't stand a chance. What strikes me the most, though, is the silence. Cities aren't supposed to be quiet. Even at their most peaceful, there's always some noise. Cars honking, people laughing, sirens wailing. But now it's like the cities themselves are holding their breath, waiting for the end. I spoke to a guy in Toronto yesterday. Said he went out to check on his neighbors and found the streets completely empty. No cars, no people, just snowdrifts taller than he was, and the sound of the wind howling through the skyscrapers. He said it felt like walking through a graveyard. I know that feeling. I stepped outside the station earlier to clear the satellite dish, and I swear the cold isn't just in the air. It's in the ground, the buildings, the bones of the earth itself. Even the sound of my own footsteps felt wrong, like they didn't belong in this frozen world. It's like the cold is alive, like it's hunting us. I keep thinking about the people who didn't make it out of the cities, the ones who thought they could ride this out, who stayed behind because they had no other choice. Like the single mom in Philadelphia who called into the station last night. She said she and her 2 kids had barricaded themselves in their apartment, trying to conserve heat. They ran out of food 2 days ago. I told her to get to a shelter, but she said the streets were too dangerous. Not because of looters or gangs, no, because of the cold. She said the moment you step outside, it feels like your skin is being peeled away. I haven't heard from her since. And then there are the ones who disappear without a trace. A man in Houston reported seeing his neighbor leave her house one morning, bundled up in every piece of clothing she owned. She said she was going to find help. That was 3 days ago. No one's seen her since. Her footprints in the snow. They just stopped, as though she vanished into thin air. It's like the cold is swallowing people whole. But it's not all despair. People are trying, in their own ways, to fight back. In Seattle, I heard about a group of engineers using old generators to power a small section of the city. They've created what they're calling a heat bubble. A small zone where families can gather and stay warm. It's not much, but it's something. And in Atlanta, volunteers are breaking into abandoned homes to gather firewood, food, and blankets for those in need. They're calling themselves the freeze fighters. Ironic, isn't it, that it takes the end of the world for us to start caring about each other again. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that humanity doesn't go down without a fight. We're stubborn, resilient creatures, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough to see us through. But for now, all we can do is survive. One day at a time, one breath at a time, one frozen night at a time. So if you're out there, if you're listening, hold on. Keep moving, keep fighting. The cities may be silent, the streets may be frozen, but we're still here. And as long as we're here, there's hope. This is Adrian Kane, signing off for the night. Stay warm, stay safe, and remember, you're not alone in this. Not yet. This is Adrian Kane, and I'm still here. Still broadcasting, still talking to the darkness, hoping someone out there is listening. Tonight I want to talk about something that's becoming harder to ignore, harder to survive. It's not just the cold that's killing us, it's hunger. The freeze has stolen more than just our warmth. It's taken the food from our plates, and it's leaving us to starve. They say you don't feel hunger at first when it's this cold. The chill numbs everything, even the gnawing pain in your stomach. But that doesn't last. Eventually the hunger comes roaring back, louder than the cold. It eats away at you, bit by bit, until there's nothing left but desperation. And desperation, well, it makes people do things they never thought they'd be capable of. Here's the problem, plain and simple. The freeze has obliterated our food supply. Crops are dead, frozen solid in the fields. Wheat, corn, vegetables gone. Livestock, they didn't stand a chance. Farmers have tried to save what they could, but the truth is, we weren't prepared for this. No one was. The supply chains have collapsed. Trucks can't move. Ships are trapped in icy ports. And grocery stores, they're empty now, just hollow shells where food used to be. I heard from a woman in Montana. She said her small town ran out of food last week. People started raiding homes, breaking into pantries, taking anything they could find. Canned goods, dried beans, even pet food. It's all gone now. She told me her family is surviving on melted snow and the last few crackers they had in the cupboard. She asked me if help was coming. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. People are getting creative, though. Desperation forces ingenuity, I suppose. In Minneapolis, there's a group that's been scavenging frozen rivers, cutting through the ice to fish. They've managed to catch enough to feed a handful of families, but it's dangerous work. One man fell through the ice last week. They said the water was so cold, it froze his lungs before they could pull him out. And then there's the other side of desperation, the darker side. I heard a story out of Chicago, one I wish I hadn't. A man broke into his neighbor's apartment looking for food. He didn't find any, but he found the neighbor. A fight broke out and, well, let's just say hunger makes monsters of us all. The man didn't leave empty-handed. And the neighbor, he didn't leave at all. It's not just the cities either. The countryside is suffering just as much, if not more. I got a call from a farmer in Kansas. Said his cattle were dying faster than he could butcher them. The meat freezes solid before he can even get it inside. He tried to send his kids to a relative's house down south, hoping they'd have a better chance there. But the car broke down in the middle of nowhere, and now he doesn't know if they're alive or dead. And then there's the children. Parents are skipping meals so their kids can eat. But even that's not enough anymore. You'd think hunger would bring us together, that we'd pool our resources, help each other survive. And in some places it has. There are shelters opening up, people sharing what little they have. But in other places, it's every man for himself. I've heard about food riots breaking out in Texas, of all places. People looting stores, fighting over scraps. The National Guard was called in, but even they're struggling to maintain order. And the worst part, it's not even the looters you have to worry about. It's the people hoarding food, keeping it hidden while their neighbors starve. I get it, survival is instinctual, but what kind of world are we trying to survive for if this is what we're becoming? If we're willing to let others die just so we can live a little longer? But it's not all hopeless. In Alaska, I heard about a group of people using old hunting cabins to set up a communal kitchen. They're pooling what little food they have, cooking meals over wood-burning stoves, and feeding anyone who shows up. They don't ask questions, don't turn anyone away. They just feed people. It's small, sure, but it's something. It's hope. And in Tennessee, a group of scientists has been working on growing food in these conditions. They've set up a greenhouse using heat lamps powered by generators. It's slow going, and they don't have much to show for it yet, but they're trying. They're fighting back, and that gives me some comfort. If you're listening to this, if you're hungry, if you're scared, know that you're not alone. There are others out there, just like you, trying to survive. Reach out if you can. Share what you have. And if you can't, if you're down to your last crumb, then hold on. Just hold on. Because I refuse to believe this is the end. There has to be a way out of this. There has to be. I'll keep broadcasting as long as I can. As long as there's power, as long as there's hope, I'll be here. So stay warm, stay strong, and remember, you're not alone in this. Not yet. This is Adrian Kane, broadcasting live, or as close to live as this frozen world allows. Tonight, I want to talk to you about something that's been haunting me. Something that's been keeping me awake, even when I'm so cold and exhausted that I can barely keep my eyes open. It's not the silence of this frozen world that gets to me. It's the sound of the ice. I know it sounds strange. Ice is quiet, right? It doesn't make a sound. But that's not true, not anymore. Out here in this endless freeze, the ice is alive. It creaks, it groans, it cracks, and sometimes if you listen closely enough, it whispers. It started a few weeks ago, at least for me. I stepped outside the station to clear the snow off the satellite dish, and I heard it. This low, deep groan, like the earth itself was shifting under the weight of the ice. At first I thought it was just the wind, but it wasn't. It was coming from the ground, from the frozen rivers, from the buildings around me. It was everywhere, and it hasn't stopped since. Scientists, well, the ones we can still hear from, say it's caused by the rapid expansion and contraction of ice as temperatures fluctuate. The ice grows thicker, heavier, and it pushes against everything. Trees, rocks, even the foundations of buildings. And when it finally gives way, it lets out these sounds, these eerie, bone-chilling sounds that echo through the night. I got a report the other day from someone up in Alaska. He said he's been hearing what he calls ice quakes. Imagine that. Earthquakes, but caused by ice. He said the ground trembles, the trees shudder, and then there's this loud crack like a gunshot, followed by a deep rumble. He said it's like the earth is breaking apart, piece by frozen piece. And it's not just the ice itself, it's what it's doing to the world around it. Roads are splitting open as the ice pushes up from below. Buildings are collapsing under the pressure. I heard about a dam in Colorado that gave way last week. The ice had built up so much that it finally burst, sending a wall of frozen water crashing down into the valley below. Entire towns were swept away in minutes. Can you imagine that? Dying not from the cold, but from the ice itself. But it's not the cracks and groans that haunt me the most. It's the whispers. I know how that sounds. Crazy, right? Maybe it's the isolation getting to me. Maybe it's the cold, but I swear, when the wind dies down and the world goes quiet, I can hear it. This faint, almost human sound, like voices carried on the wind. It's not words exactly, just sounds, murmurs, whispers, like the ice is trying to tell us something. I'm not the only one who's heard it. A truck driver in Montana called in last night, said he'd been driving down an old, frozen highway when he heard it. This soft, eerie sound coming from the woods. He thought it was someone calling for help, so he stopped and got out of his truck. Big mistake. The moment he stepped away from his vehicle, the ice beneath him cracked. He barely made it back before the ground gave way. But here's the thing. He swears there was no one out there. No footprints in the snow. Nothing, just the sound of the ice. I've been wondering if the ice is trying to warn us. You know, like it's alive somehow. Maybe it's nature's way of fighting back, of taking revenge for everything we've done to this planet. Maybe this freeze is the Earth's way of saying, enough. We ignored the warnings for so long. The melting glaciers, the rising seas, the superstorms. We thought we could outlast it all. Build bigger walls, stronger levees, better technology. But now we're paying the price. The ice is here, and it's not going away. And it's letting us know every groan, every crack, every whisper, that we're not in control anymore. I got a call yesterday from a man in Minnesota. Said he was out hunting, trying to find food for his family. He came across a frozen lake and decided to test the ice, see if he could catch some fish. He said he heard this sound, this deep resonant hum, like a giant tuning fork, and then the ice started to crack beneath his feet. He managed to get off the lake, but when he looked back, the entire surface was shattered, like a giant mirror had been smashed. He told me he felt like the lake was alive, watching him. And then there's the family in Maine. They were staying in an old cabin trying to ride out the freeze. One night, they heard a noise, this loud grinding sound, like metal being twisted apart. They thought it was a tree falling, but when they went outside, they found the entire cabin had shifted off its foundation. The ice had pushed up from below, breaking through the floorboards. They had to leave everything behind and walk miles to the nearest shelter. So, if you're listening to this, if you're out there in the cold, pay attention to the sounds around you. The ice isn't just a silent killer. It's loud, it's alive, and it's unpredictable. Don't trust it. Don't think for a second that you're safe, just because you're standing on solid ground. Out here, there's no such thing as solid ground anymore. We can't stop the ice, we can't fight it, but we can survive it. We have to, because if we don't, if we let the ice win, then all those whispers, all those groans and cracks, they'll be all that's left of us. Echoes in the cold, memories frozen in time. This is Adrian Kane, signing off for the night. Listen closely, stay warm, stay safe, and remember, you're not alone out there. Not yet. This is Adrian Kane, still here, still broadcasting, still clinging to the fragile thread that connects me to all of you. Tonight, I want to talk about something we've all been chasing since the freeze began. Not just the kind that keeps your body alive, but the kind that makes life worth living. The kind that's slipping away from us, one ember at a time. Let's get the facts out of the way first. Staying warm has become a battle most of us are losing. The power grids in most major cities are gone. Overloaded, frozen, collapsed under the weight of ice and snow. Natural gas lines have frozen solid, and heating oil is a rare commodity, hoarded like gold. Wood stoves, fireplaces, and old-fashioned coal heaters are making a comeback. But even they can only do so much when the temperatures drop to levels we've never seen before. You'd think the cold would kill you quickly, but it doesn't. Hypothermia sneaks up on you, quiet and patient. First you shiver, then your fingers go numb, your skin turns pale. Eventually you stop feeling cold altogether. You start feeling warm. That's the cruel irony of it. People die smiling, thinking they're finally warm again. But there are places where warmth still exists, even now. I heard about a church in Kansas that's turned into a refuge. They've got a wood-burning stove, and the pastor's been working around the clock to keep it going. People are huddled together on pews, wrapped in blankets, sharing body heat. They've even started singing hymns again, trying to drown out the sound of the wind outside. It's not much, but it's something, a spark in the darkness. And then there's the family in Vermont. They built a makeshift igloo in their backyard, used snow and ice as insulation. Sounds crazy, right? But it works. The inside stays just warm enough to keep them alive. They're living off canned soup and melted snow, but they're alive. But for every story of survival, there are 100 stories of loss. I got a call last night from a man in Texas, a place that never should have seen this kind of cold. He said his wife and daughter were stuck in their car when the freeze hit. The engine died, the heater stopped working, and by the time he found them, it was too late. He told me he held their hands as the frostbite set in, as their breaths grew shallow until they weren't breathing anymore. He said their hands were still warm, even after they were gone. I don't know how we come back from losses like that. I don't know if we can, but we have to try. Because if we don't, if we let the cold take more than our bodies, if we let it take our hearts, then what's the point of surviving at all? I want you to think about all the little ways warmth used to touch our lives. The sun on your face on a summer morning, the heat of a campfire, the glow of a candle, the way your hands felt when you held a cup of coffee, or when you held someone else's hands. All those tiny fleeting moments that we took for granted. They're gone now, or close to it. The world feels colder in more ways than one. The streets are empty, the laughter is gone. Even the animals have gone quiet. It's like the cold has stolen the soul of this planet, leaving us with nothing but frost and shadows. But even in the coldest places, I've seen people fight to keep that warmth alive. I got a letter, yes, an actual letter, from a man in Canada. He's been using an old wood stove to heat his home, and every night he invites his neighbors over. They sit around the stove, sharing stories, passing around whatever food they have left. He said they've even started telling ghost stories, trying to scare the cold away. He signed the letter with these words: "The cold can take our heat, but it can't take our humanity." I think about that a lot. About how even now, even in the face of all this, we're still trying, still hoping, still holding on to each other. That's the kind of warmth that can't be extinguished. Not by ice, not by darkness, not by anything. But let's not pretend it's easy. I've heard about people burning anything they can find just to stay alive. Furniture, books, family heirlooms, things that meant something once. I got a call from a woman in Detroit who said she had to burn her wedding dress to keep her children warm. She told me it felt like losing a piece of herself, but she didn't have a choice. What good is a memory, she said, if we don't survive to keep it alive? And then there's the other side of it, the people who don't have anything left to burn. The ones who curl up in abandoned buildings, hoping their body heat will be enough. It usually isn't. They're the ones we find frozen in their sleep, their faces peaceful, their bodies still. If you're listening to this, if you're still fighting, then know this. You are the last warmth of this world. Your breath, your heartbeat, your will to survive, that's what's keeping the fire alive. Don't let it go out. Don't let the cold win. Because as long as there's even one ember left, there's hope. So light a fire if you can. Hold someone close. Share what little warmth you have. Because in the end, it's not the cold that will kill us. It's the loss of each other. And that's something we can't afford to lose. This is Adrian Kane, signing off for now. Stay warm, stay alive, and remember, the cold is strong, but we are stronger. We have to be... This is Adrian Kane, coming to you from somewhere deep in the frostbitten remains of our world. Tonight, I want to take you beyond the cities and towns, the places we once called home, and talk about the frontiers. The edges of the map, where civilization meets the wild, where the cold has carved its mark into the land, and the people who dare to survive there. The frozen frontiers are no longer just remote. They've become something else entirely. They've become the unknown. Let's start with the places that were already cold before all this began. Alaska, Siberia, northern Canada, the frozen wildernesses that once thrived in their own harsh, frigid ways. For the people living there, the cold wasn't a new enemy. It was an old, familiar companion. But even they weren't prepared for this. No one was... I got a call a few days ago from a woman in Whitehorse, up in the Yukon. She said the cold has gotten so bad that even the wildlife is disappearing. The caribou herds have moved south, chasing food and warmer ground that no longer exists. The rivers are frozen solid, and with them, the fish are gone. She told me her family tried to dig into the permafrost for shelter, but the ground was too hard, too unforgiving. They've resorted to scavenging, taking whatever they can find from abandoned cabins and outposts. She said, Adrian, I've lived in the cold my whole life, but this is different. It feels like the cold is alive, like it's hunting us. The frontiers have always been a place for explorers, for those looking to conquer the unknown. But now, the explorers are not chasing glory, they're chasing survival. I've heard about groups venturing into the frozen wilderness, looking for supplies, for shelter, for anything that can give them a fighting chance. They call themselves trailblazers, but their trails don't lead to safety. They lead to more cold, more emptiness, more danger. One of these groups, a team of 5 men and women, set out from Fairbanks, Alaska, heading deeper into the wilderness to find an old research station. They were hoping to salvage equipment, maybe even find records of what the scientists there had discovered about the freeze. 2 weeks later, only one of them came back. She said they found the station buried under snow and ice, its windows shattered, its walls frozen solid. Inside, they found journals, notes, even a few frozen bodies. But then the blizzard hit. She said the cold was like nothing she'd ever felt, like it was alive, seeping into their bones, whispering to them to give up. The others didn't make it. She said she could still hear their voices when the wind howled. And it's not just the cold places that have become frontiers. Even the deserts and the tropics have been transformed. I heard from a trucker in Australia who's been driving what they're now calling ice roads. He said the outback, yes, the outback, has been buried under layers of frost and snow. Sand dunes have turned into frozen hills, and the wildlife that once thrived there is either gone or struggling to adapt. Kangaroos with frostbite, emus scavenging for food in ghost towns. It's a world turned upside down. He told me about a convoy he was part of, carrying supplies from one isolated community to another. They were halfway across the frozen desert when the lead truck broke down. Temperatures dropped so low that the fuel in their engines began to gel. They had to abandon the truck and press on with what they could carry. He said the night was so cold they couldn't stop moving, not even for a moment, or they would have frozen where they stood. By the time they reached their destination, 2 of the drivers had severe frostbite. One of them didn't make it. And then there are the oceans, our planet's last great frontier. They've always been vast, mysterious, unpredictable. But now there's something else entirely. Reports have been coming in about ships trapped in ice, entire fleets immobilized as the seas freeze around them. Some of these ships are ghost vessels now, abandoned by their crews, left to drift, or rather to stay frozen, in the middle of nowhere. There was a story out of Greenland about a fishing trawler that got caught in the ice. The crew tried to wait it out, hoping the freeze would pass. It didn't. A rescue team found the ship months later, its hull encased in ice, its crew frozen in place. One of them was still sitting at the helm, his hands clutching the wheel, his face turned toward the horizon. It was as if he thought he could still steer them to safety. The frontiers are full of stories like these. Stories of people trying to push the limits, trying to survive in places that were never meant to be lived in. And for every story of someone who makes it back, there are dozens more who don't. They're the ones who get swallowed by the cold, their bodies and their stories lost to the ice. But what choice do we have? The cities are no longer safe. The infrastructure that kept us warm, that kept us alive, is gone. And so we're forced to venture out into the unknown, to the edges of the map, hoping to find something, anything, that can help us survive. Sometimes we find it, sometimes we don't. The thing about frontiers is that they used to be boundaries, lines that separated the known from the unknown. But now those lines don't exist anymore. The freeze has erased them, turned the whole world into a frontier. Every step we take is into the unknown. Every choice we make is a gamble. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. Maybe it's a reminder of what it means to be human. To face the unknown, to adapt, to survive. We've done it before. We crossed oceans, climbed mountains, explored jungles. The frontier is in our blood. And if we can hold on to that, if we can remember who we are, then maybe, just maybe, we can find a way through this. This is Adrian Kane, your voice in the cold, coming to you from somewhere deep in this frozen world. Tonight I want to talk about something that's been haunting me and haunting us all. It's not just the cold or the hunger or the endless struggle to survive. No, it's something deeper, something that lives in the spaces between the silence and the frost. Tonight I want to talk about the ghosts of the freeze. Let me start with a story I heard from a listener. A man named Callum, who's been tuning in from northern Montana. Callum said that ever since the temperatures dropped, his small town has grown quieter and quieter. The streets are empty, the houses frozen, and even the animals have disappeared. But in the stillness of the night, when the wind howls through the empty streets, he hears voices. He told me it started as a faint whisper, like the sound of someone talking just out of earshot. At first, he thought it was the wind playing tricks on him. But then, one night, he heard his wife's voice. The thing is, his wife died 2 years ago. He said the voice was so clear, so familiar, calling his name from somewhere in the frozen dark. He ran outside into the blizzard, but there was no one there, just the wind and the snow. Callum's not the only one who's heard them. I got another message, this one from a trucker named Maria. She was driving supplies through what used to be Texas. Yes, even Texas is frozen now, and she saw something she can't explain. She was halfway through an empty stretch of highway when she spotted a caravan of people walking along the road. Men, women, children, all dressed in tattered clothes, their faces pale and frostbitten. She pulled over, rolled down her window, and called out to them. But they didn't respond. They just kept walking, their footsteps crunching in the snow. She said their eyes were empty, like they weren't really there. She tried to follow them, but when she rounded a bend in the road, they were gone. Vanished. She told me, "Adrian, I know what I saw. I wasn't imagining it, and I believe her. There's something about this freeze that feels different from anything we faced before. It's not just the cold, it's the way it seems to linger, to hold on to things, memories, voices, even people. It's like the freeze doesn't just take them, it keeps them. And sometimes it lets them go, just for a moment, like an echo bouncing back to remind us of what we've lost. I know some of you listening have lost people, friends, family, neighbors, and I know some of you have seen them, heard them, even felt them. You've told me about the figures you've seen standing in the snow, the laughter you've heard coming from empty houses, the handprints on frosted windows that shouldn't be there. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it's the cold messing with our minds, or if the freeze has torn some kind of hole in the fabric of reality. But whatever it is, it's real. Too many of you have experienced it for it to be a coincidence. I have one more story for you tonight. It's about a town in Michigan that's been completely abandoned. I won't name it. You'll understand why in a moment. The town was evacuated early on when the freeze first hit, but a few people stayed behind, thinking they could ride it out. Those people, they're gone now, but the town isn't empty. A rescue team went in about a month ago, looking for survivors. They found the streets buried in snow, the houses frozen solid, but they also found footprints, fresh footprints leading from house to house. They followed them, thinking someone might still be alive. But the prints just stopped, right in the middle of the town square. No signs of a struggle, no indication of where the person or people went. Just gone. The team set up camp for the night, planning to search again in the morning. But by dawn, 2 of their members were missing. The others searched everywhere, but they didn't find a single clue. No footprints, no broken ice, nothing. They left the town that same day, and they haven't gone back since. Stories like these make me wonder, what is it about the freeze that feels so alive? It's like it's not just a force of nature, it's something more. Something that watches, listens, and waits. I don't know if it's trying to punish us or if it's just indifferent, but I do know this. The freeze doesn't just take your body. It takes your mind, your memories, your soul, and sometimes it gives them back in ways we don't understand. I wish I could tell you it's all in our heads, that the whispers, the shadows, the voices are just tricks of the wind and the cold, but I can't, because I've heard them too. Late at night, when the generator is barely humming and the world outside is silent, I've heard them. My brother's voice calling my name. He died 5 years ago, long before the freeze, and yet, when the wind howls just right, I swear I can hear him clear as day, telling me to come home. Maybe the cold has blurred the line between the living and the dead. Maybe it's opened a door to something we're not meant to see. Or maybe it's just us, our memories, our grief, our fear, manifesting in the only way it can. I don't have the answers. All I have are the stories you've shared with me and the ones I've lived myself. But here's what I know for sure. The ghosts of the freeze are not here to harm us. They're reminders, echoes of what we've lost, of who we used to be, of the world we've left behind. They're a warning too, telling us to hold on, to keep moving, to fight for the warmth that still exists within us. This is Adrian Kane, signing off for the night. If you hear the whispers, if you see the shadows, if you feel the presence of someone you've lost, don't be afraid. You're not alone. We're all haunted in one way or another. But as long as we remember who we are, as long as we hold on to the warmth in our hearts, the freeze can't take everything from us. Stay warm, stay safe, and listen closely. Sometimes, the ghosts have something important to say. This is Adrian Kane, your voice in the cold, still broadcasting from the edge of survival. Tonight, I need you to listen carefully, because what I'm about to share might be the most important thing I've ever told you. It's about the freeze and the truth behind it. You see, the whispers I've been hearing aren't just from the wind. They've been coming from people, scientists, whistleblowers, survivors with stories too chilling to ignore. And those stories all point to one unsettling conclusion. This freeze wasn't entirely natural. Let's go back to the beginning, before the first frost, before the oceans froze and the deserts turned to ice. Climate change had already pushed our world to the brink. Rising temperatures, melting glaciers, droughts, wildfires, humanity was staring down the barrel of its own extinction. And somewhere, in a hidden laboratory, a group of brilliant but desperate minds thought they could stop it. Geoengineering, they called it. The ultimate attempt to fix what we'd broken. The plan was simple on paper. Release particles into the atmosphere to reflect sunlight and cool the planet. They called it global dimming. Scientists had theorized about it for years, but this time someone actually did it. Quietly, secretly. Maybe it was a government, maybe a rogue organization, or maybe even a coalition of nations working in the shadows. I don't know who, but they succeeded too well. The first reports of unusual cooling came out of the Arctic, temperatures dropping faster than anyone could explain. At first they celebrated. We've bought ourselves more time, they said. Crops started growing in regions that had been too hot to sustain life. Ice was returning to the poles, but then the cooling didn't stop. Within months, weather patterns went haywire. Storms became more violent, unpredictable. Entire regions were hit with record-breaking snowfalls, and the frost began creeping southward. By the time the public realized what was happening, it was too late. Whoever triggered the experiment underestimated the complexity of Earth's systems. They thought they could control the temperature like a thermostat, but they forgot one crucial detail. Once you disrupt a system this vast, you can't just turn it off. The particles they released into the atmosphere didn't just reflect sunlight, they disrupted the jet streams. These are the highways of wind that guide weather systems around the planet. With the jet streams in chaos, cold air from the poles spilled down unchecked, invading regions that had never seen snow before. Deserts froze, tropical rainforests turned into icy wastelands, and the oceans, the beating heart of our planet's climate, began to freeze over. I've heard from oceanographers, climatologists, people who've seen it with their own eyes. The oceans are more than just water. They're a massive engine that drives weather, regulates temperatures, and supports life. When they freeze, everything changes. Storms intensify, ecosystems collapse, and the planet enters a feedback loop of cooling that no one can stop. I want you to think about the scale of this. Entire cities buried under snow, crops failing on a global scale, supply chains frozen, literally, billions of people displaced, starving, freezing, all because someone thought they could play God with the weather. I've heard your stories. Parents trying to keep their children warm with nothing but candlelight. Farmers watching their fields turn to ice overnight. Families huddled in shelters, hoping the generators don't run out of fuel. And then there's the sickness, the frostbite, the hypothermia, the respiratory illnesses that come from breathing air so cold it feels like knives in your lungs. This is what the experiment has cost us. This is what it's cost you. But here's where it gets darker. I've been in touch with someone who claims to have worked on the project. They won't tell me their real name. I only know them as Eclipse. According to Eclipse, the freeze was no accident. Yes, it started as an attempt to stop climate change, but when the experiment spiraled out of control, those in power didn't try to stop it. They let it continue. Why? Because they saw an opportunity. Think about it. A frozen world means a reset. Governments consolidating power. Corporations profiting from the sale of survival gear, food rations, and fuel. The rich retreating to their heated bunkers, while the rest of us are left to freeze. Eclipse told me there are files, classified documents detailing contingency plans for a post-freeze economy. They planned for this. They planned for us to suffer so they could come out on top. But here's the thing about humanity. We're stubborn. We adapt. In every corner of this frozen world, people are fighting back. I've heard of communities building underground farms, using geothermal heat to grow food. engineers developing wind-powered generators to keep the lights on, even scientists working on ways to reverse the freeze, not through another experiment, but by healing the planet the way it was meant to heal. I've heard about a group in Australia near what used to be the Great Barrier Reef. They've built an entire city beneath the ice, using technology salvaged from abandoned research stations. They call themselves the Adapters. They believe we can survive this, not by fighting nature, but by working with it. And I believe them. But here's the question that keeps me up at night. Can we survive long enough to make it? Because for every story of hope, there are 10 of despair. Entire nations wiped out, species extinct, cultures lost, and all because of one experiment, one decision made in secret without our consent. We have to hold on. We have to adapt, like the survivors in Australia, the farmers in the Midwest, the scientists in Iceland who are using volcanic heat to power entire towns. We have to tell the stories of what's happening so the truth doesn't freeze along with everything else. That's why I'm still here, broadcasting to you from this cold, dark world, because someone has to keep the light alive. This is Adrian Kane, signing off for the night. If you're still listening, remember this. The freeze wasn't natural, but our survival is. Humanity has endured plagues, wars, and disasters before. We've come back from the brink time and time again, and we can do it again. But we can't do it alone. Keep each other warm, share your stories, and never ever stop fighting for the world we still have. This is Adrian Kane, your ever-watchful companion in the cold. If you're listening tonight, then you've made it. Another day, another battle fought and won against the freeze. But tonight, I want to talk about what lies beyond this endless winter. Not just survival, but something more. Something worth fighting for. I find myself thinking about the world before the freeze. The warmth of the sun on your skin. The sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. The taste of fresh fruit, picked straight from the tree. Those moments, those simple, beautiful moments, feel like dreams now. But they were real once. And if they were real before, maybe, just maybe, they can be real again. I've been collecting stories from survivors. Not just stories of hardship, but stories of hope. There's a woman in Kansas. She's teaching her children how to grow food using scraps and seeds from salvaged supplies. There's a man in Scotland living in an ancient stone castle who's figured out how to distill fuel from algae growing in underground ponds. And then there's the community in Nevada using the heat from abandoned geothermal plants to build an oasis in the ice. These people, these innovators, are carving out a future in the frost. But here's the thing, listeners. Hope isn't just growing in isolated pockets. It's buried in the ice itself. Scientists have discovered something extraordinary. Beneath layers of permafrost, in regions that haven't thawed in thousands of years, there are ecosystems, entire worlds, preserved and waiting. Microorganisms that hold secrets to adapting to extreme cold. Seeds that might one day grow again. And perhaps, just perhaps, clues to reversing what has happened to our planet. In Siberia, there's a research team working tirelessly, even as temperatures drop to unimaginable lows. They're mapping these frozen ecosystems, trying to understand how life once thrived in such hostile conditions. And they're not alone. From Canada to Antarctica, teams of scientists, engineers, and dreamers are racing against time to find answers. If they succeed, they might just give us the key to a world beyond the ice. But survival has its costs. I've heard stories of communities turning against each other, of desperation driving people to do unthinkable things. In the face of such cold, it's easy to forget our humanity. But we can't. We mustn't. Because if we lose that, then what's the point of surviving at all? I've seen what happens when people forget. There's a town up north, well, what's left of it. Once a thriving refuge for survivors, it became a battlefield when resources ran low. Now, it's a ghost town, its streets littered with the remnants of what might have been. We can't let that happen again. Us. I know it feels impossible right now. The cold has stolen so much from us: homes, families, dreams. But every step we take, no matter how small, is a step towards something better. I've heard whispers of a plan, something big, a global coalition of scientists and leaders working together to find a way out of this frozen nightmare. They call it Project Aurora. The details are scarce, but from what I've pieced together, Project Aurora isn't just about survival. It's about restoration. They're experimenting with ways to warm the planet carefully this time. Controlled releases of heat, methods to rebalance the atmosphere. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but it's a start, and maybe, just maybe, it's the beginning of a thaw. So what lies beyond the ice? That's the question I keep coming back to. Is it a return to the world we lost? Or is it something new entirely? I think about the stories you've shared with me. The resilience, the ingenuity, the kindness. Maybe, beyond the ice, there's a better version of us waiting. A version that's learned from our mistakes. A version that respects the fragile balance of this planet we call home. I don't know if I'll live to see it. I don't know if any of us will. But I do know this. As long as we keep fighting, as long as we keep believing, the freeze doesn't win. Tonight, as I sit here in this dimly lit studio, the wind howling outside, I want you to do something for me. Close your eyes. Picture the world beyond the ice. Picture green fields, warm sun, the laughter of children, the sound of waves crashing against the shore. Hold on to that image. Let it guide you through the cold. Because one day, whether it's in a month, a year, or a century, we'll find our way back to it. This is Adrian Kane signing off. Stay warm, stay safe, and remember, the cold can't last forever. Beyond the ice, there's a world waiting for us. We just have to reach it.